Thank you, Uncle Tyrus. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave now, Austin said. Have a safe journey, Your Highness. Tyrus smiled and personally escorted Austin out. Dustin removed his mask when they got in the car and left the mansion. He sighed and said, Austin, you didn't have to sacrifice yourself. We could have found another way. Logan, you and Father have protected me my whole life. It's time for me to stand on my own. Austin flashed a playful smile. Besides, I'm more than happy to marry a beautiful woman. This is hardly a sacrifice. Throughout history, noble families often engaged in intermarriages to strengthen their influence for mutual benefits and provide support for each other. Even though he was the son of the Prince of West Lucosia, Tyrus' daughter also held an esteemed status, making them a suitable match. All right, Logan, don't overthink it. Our current focus is on quelling the rebellion. We can discuss future matters at a later time, Austin said with a smile. Dustin nodded and changed the topic. Are we going to South Vista to meet the Marquis of Silvercrest next? 1. That's right. Austin confirmed. The Marquis of Silvercrest is the most influential among the Southern sovereigns. However, he's also the most challenging to deal with. Our plan's success hinges on the Marquis of Silvercrest, Elijah Valor. Dustin and Austin opted to skip sleep, and the following morning, they swiftly arrived at South Vista. This territory belonged to Elijah Valor, the Marquis of Silvercrest. It was renowned for having the largest military force and the strongest economy among the Southern sovereigns. However, Elijah was a stubborn and unpredictable man. There were instances where he showed no respect, even to Rufus. This unpredictability made Austin doubtful about convincing him. Logan, we've arrived at the Marquis of Silvercrest's residence, Austin informed as they, along with a few others, disembarked from the car. It's been 2 days. We can't keep your absence from the castle under wraps much longer. We need to speed up our efforts, Dustin reminded. I understand. Austin nodded. Elijah might not be easy to deal with, but he's not entirely without integrity. With the right incentives and an emotional appeal, we should be able to convince him. Dustin nodded. All right, let's head in. Austin adjusted his attire and refreshed himself before approaching the mansion. He then identified himself to the guards and, as expected, gained a smooth entry. However, unlike previous encounters, they were directed to Elijah's personal training ground instead of the main hall. It was common knowledge that Elijah was a martial enthusiast. He personally led the training of his troops on a regular basis, resulting in a formidable and well-trained force. Your Highness, Lord Valor is currently training inside. Please, head in, a guard said. He led them to the entrance of the training ground before leaving. As they entered, they noticed a muscular middle-aged man in the center of the arena, engaged in a sparring session with several elite guards. Wielding a long spear, the middle-aged man exuded a commanding presence. His spearplay demonstrated a blend of agility and dominance, effortlessly pushing back the elite guards armed with swords and shields that surrounded him. These elite guards were the cream of the crop from the monarchy, trained to fight as a cohesive unit. They were capable of taking on 100 enemies on their own. Despite their exceptional skills, the middle-aged man showcased his overwhelming strength as he effortlessly repelled their advances. That man was none other than Elijah Valor, the Marquis of Silvercrest. His technique is impressive. Austin was visibly astonished as he observed Elijah closely. Elijah's spearplay was devoid of unnecessary movements, appearing both straightforward and unpredictable. It embodied a perfect balance of battlefield might and sophisticated finesse, nearing perfection. It is indeed quite remarkable. Dustin nodded in agreement, casting an admiring glance. Elijah's skills had reached the pinnacle of a grandmaster's, making him one of the top 10 martial practitioners in West Lucosia. Despite receiving the title of Marquis, Elijah remained steadfast in his dedication to martial arts. He showcased exceptional willpower, mental resilience, and determination beyond ordinary standards. Warriors Cascade. After demonstrating his prowess, Elijah suddenly roared, grabbing the spear's end with one hand. He then swept it around himself, knocking down the elite guards in all directions. Only Elijah remained standing after his spear completed its sweeping motion. You are all becoming increasingly incompetent. From now on, you need to practice diligently. Do you understand? Elijah reprimanded the guards. Yes, sir. The guards responded while on their knees. All right, you can all leave now. Elijah waved, signaling the guards to depart. Only then did he turn his attention to Austin and his entourage. Uncle Elijah, your spear technique is truly exceptional. No one in West Leucosia comes close. It's admirable, Austin said as a way of greeting. Your Highness, I'm certain your presence holds a purpose after such a long journey. What instructions do you have for me? Elijah wiped himself off with a towel. I dare not give instructions, Uncle Elijah. I come with a request, Austin responded. Is this about your father? Elijah was not surprised. It was as if he had anticipated it. You already know about it. Austin raised an eyebrow. The Prince of West Leucosia was assassinated. How could I not know about such a significant event? Elijah drank some tea, seemingly indifferent, as he settled into his seat. Then, have you heard about the Northern for Sovereigns rebellion? Austin asked. I've heard some rumors. Elijah nodded. Uncle Elijah, given your loyalty and valor, I seek your aid in the monarchy's time of crisis, Austin said, lowering his head respectfully. Because of my admiration for your father's character, I would have readily offered assistance had it been him who visited. However, as for you, the qualifications you lack. After delivering his blunt and merciless statement, Elijah downed his tea in one gulp. Austin frowned momentarily but quickly regained his composure. He had long understood Elijah's pride and unpredictability. That was why he had already mentally prepared for the challenges ahead. Uncle Elijah, I acknowledge that compared to my father, I am indeed inadequate and not qualified to make requests of you. Austin suddenly shifted his tone. However, I carry the Reese family name. And more importantly, I am a man of West Leucosia. I cannot stand idly by while West Leucosia is in turmoil, watching the people become displaced. As long as I can calm this turbulence, I am willing to pay any price. Oh, Elijah raised an eyebrow slightly, quite surprised. He didn't expect the once idle playboy to blurt out such words. It was somewhat unusual. Did your mother teach you to say that? Elijah probed. These are words from the bottom of my heart, Austin said with a serious expression. It's been a few years since I last met you. You seem to have changed. Elijah scrutinized him before continuing. To be honest, before you came, Grand General Reese had already sent me a letter. Can you guess what he said in the letter? Grand General Reese? Austin's pupils dilated and his expression grew solemn. I'm not sure. Please enlighten me, Uncle Elijah. Elijah picked up his spear and wiped the tip with a white cloth. In a low voice, he answered, Julius said that if I kill you and erase all evidence, he will give me to cities after all is done. Austin's expression shifted dramatically with Elijah's revelation. He didn't expect Julius to be prepared to kill 2 cities. Elijah stood up slowly and pointed his long spear at Austin. A faint smile played on his lips. This is a huge temptation. What do you think? Should I agree? Seeing Elijah's piercing glance and his raised spear, Austin was not afraid at all. He continued to keep his back straight. Uncle Elijah, the temptation of acquiring 2 cities is indeed huge. I probably wouldn't refuse if I was you. If you want to use my life in exchange for the 2 cities, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. Austin clasped his hands calmly. What, aren't you afraid of death? Elijah narrowed his eyes. Or do you think that I don't dare to kill you? Of course, I'm afraid of death. If I could choose, I wouldn't choose to die either, Austin replied calmly. He continued, plus, you've been on the battlefield for many years, killing all kinds of enemies. If you want to kill me, it won't take much effort for you to do so. Since you're afraid of death, why are you so calm? Elijah was a bit confused. Fear of death is one thing, but having the courage to face death is another. I've prepared myself for the worst ever since I entered, Austin replied seriously. Plus, there's no way I can escape if you want to kill me. It's better to face you head on, not to mention I can avoid some suffering. Interesting, Elijah suddenly smiled and slowly lowered his spear. They said a fierce father would not raise a tame son. I finally got to witness this today. The Reese family does not have a single weakling. Thank you for your praise. Austin tilted his head. All right, I'll stop joking around. Julius' men did indeed come looking for me. However, I already killed him. With a snap of his fingers, a few guards soon dragged a corpse to Austin's feet. This is the man that Julius arranged. Elijah kicked the corpse in disdain. Uncle Elijah, are you not planning to take over Julius' offer of 2 cities? I can't beat his proposal, Austin said. Although I'm not a good person, I won't do something so treacherous. I owe your father a favor. If I killed you, wouldn't it make me the same as an animal? Elijah replied indifferently. You're such a righteous person. I respect that. Austin clasped his hands respectfully. Austin was so confident partly because his eldest brother was there. Other than that, he also knew Elijah well. Elijah was a decisive person. If he truly wanted to kill someone, he wouldn't waste so much time talking. Instead, he would kill the person as soon as he saw them. All right, stop praising me. Although I didn't kill you, it doesn't mean I'll help you. Elijah replied indifferently. I do respect your father. However, you haven't gotten my recognition yet. Feel free to state any conditions. If I can do it, I'll definitely not refuse, Austin said earnestly. Okay, let's forget about all personal affairs and only talk about business. Elijah replied meaningfully. I believe you know the dangers involved if I follow you to betray and resist Julian, Grand General of the Iron Stallion Cavalry. My troops will suffer heavy losses with a single mistake. How do you plan to compensate for that? I can represent the royal family and give you a city, Julian answered. The 8 sovereigns of West Lucosia had their own territories. Usually, neither side was willing to yield to the other when there was interference. Gifting Elijah a city would mean disrupting this balance. It would cause plenty of trouble in the future. However, Julian couldn't take it into consideration right now. A city is still not enough. Elijah shook his head. Uncle Elijah, what else do you need? You can just let me know, Julian replied. I want 800 soldiers in the Black Dragon army. Pick the best of them. Elijah answered. 800 best soldiers in Black Dragon army. Julian furrowed his brow. West Lucosia's Black Dragon army were extremely experienced soldiers, the elite among the elite. Elites in the Black Dragon army could refer to themselves as the king of soldiers. For Elijah to want 800 kings of soldiers was going too far. After all, each king of soldiers would undergo years of training. All kinds of rare resources would be used for them to train. The manpower, money, and materials used on the soldiers were immeasurable. What? Are you not willing to? Elijah asked. You should know that if this was Julius, he would accept if I asked for 3,000 elite soldiers. Not to mention 800. Julius has a large army and many soldiers. I don't have a foundation, so I naturally cannot compete with him, Austin sighed. That's why I only want 800 elite soldiers. I've already considered your father when I proposed this condition. Elijah yawned. Of course, you can discuss it with your mother if you cannot decide. However, I'm not sure if it'll be too late by then. After hesitating for a moment, Austin nodded in the end. Okay, I agree. If you can help us in the rebellion, I agree to give you 800 elite soldiers from the Black Dragon army. Very good. Elijah couldn't help but laugh after hearing that. A man should be fearless. What's 800 elite soldiers to you? When you inherit the throne, the entire West Lucosia will be yours. Is it a deal, then? Austin narrowed his eyes. Of course. Elijah answered proudly. I don't have many virtues except for being able to keep my word. From now onward, my troops are at your disposal. Thank you." Austin let out a sigh of relief. "Also, I decided to gift you something since you didn't dilly-dally." Elijah ordered some writing materials and quickly wrote a letter. Then he gave the letter to Austin with a smile. "If I guessed correctly, you'll be going to Marquis Lincoln's territory later. I have a good relationship with him. With this letter, your chances of convincing him will greatly increase. Thank you, Uncle Elijah." Austin clasped his hands gratefully. "All right, time is ticking. Go on with it." Elijah waved his hands in dismissal. "Goodbye," Austin said before leaving with his men. Elijah had agreed to team up with him. This meant only one person was left at Lincoln, Marquis of Riverside. Lincoln was different from powerful military commanders like Elijah. He was originally a civil servant. He rose from a humble position to become a regional marquis. Lincoln was capable and extremely smart. No one could outwit him in West Leucosia. If Austin could get Lincoln's support, he could add a strategist to his cause. In the evening, Austin, Dustin, and a few others arrived at the border fortress, Peace City. Peace City was Lincoln's territory. A decade ago, it was still a deserted small town. However, under Lincoln's leadership, it became West Leucosia's top 5 city in less than 10 years. Peace City was one of the best in the military, economy, politics, culture, education, and even medicine sector. It could be said that Peace City's achievements were all thanks to Lincoln's knowledge and outstanding capability. If Elijah was considered a hero in chaotic times, Lincoln was a capable marquis in peaceful times. A black SUV slowly stopped beside the road outside the Marquis of Riverside's residence. The car door opened and Dustin and Austin got out of the car one after another. "Dustin, this is the last stop." Austin looked at the Marquis. Riverside's door plate and sighed. He continued, "Lincoln has quite a good relationship with Dad. Not to mention he's also righteous, and we have Elijah's letter. It should go smoothly." "It's hard to say." Dustin shook his head. "We must put our guard up despite approaching the last step. Lincoln is a schemer. Even Rufus can't see through him. Nobody knows what he's thinking. Are you scared that something will happen?" Austin tried asking. Since Julius has already contacted Elijah, he must have talked with Lincoln as well. "I'm scared that Lincoln has already agreed to join Julius' side. If that's the case, we're just voluntarily walking into a trap by coming here," Dustin analyzed. Julius was not stupid. It could be said he was both intelligent and a good fighter. He was the Grand General of the Iron Stallion Cavalry, after all. With his intelligence, Julius surely would be able to guess what they were thinking. Thus, he wouldn't just sit back and watch them trying to get people on their team. This was attested when Julius offered to cities in exchange for Elijah's support. Among the Southern for sovereigns, Wyatt and Arthur had handed over their military insignia. Thus, they were definitely on Dustin's side. Meanwhile, Tyrus had already signed a wedding agreement with the royal family. With mutual interests binding both sides, there shouldn't be a problem. As for Elijah, he rejected Julius's condition and even killed his men. Thus, there was no way the two could work together anymore. Now, only Lincoln was left. What choice he would make was still uncertain. If Lincoln agreed to side with the monarchy, Dustin would have the capability to confront Julius. However, Dustin would be in big trouble if Lincoln agreed to side with Julius. "Dustin, your concerns aren't without reason. However, we don't have a choice. We must give it a try and hope Lincoln will side with us," Austin said with a sigh. "Okay, with me around, at least I can ensure your safety." Dustin nodded. He had already prepared for the worst. If Lincoln sided with Julian and set a trap for them, Dustin would destroy his residence and support new personnel to take over. Of course, he didn't want to use violence to solve problems unless it was absolutely necessary. "Let's go and meet Lincoln." Austin became more confident and marched up to the door. "Greetings, Your Highness." When Austin got close, an old butler immediately greeted him. Austin was stunned for a moment. He didn't introduce himself or take out his badge. Thus, he wondered how the butler recognized him with just a glance. You know me. Austin felt a bit strange. After thinking for a moment, he remembered he had never entered the Marquis Riverside residence before. Sir Blaise knows that you're coming, so he asked me to wait for you, the old butler admitted with a nod. He knows that I'm coming. Austin raised an eyebrow. Then he took a look at Dustin uneasily. There were only two possibilities why Lincoln could guess they were coming beforehand. Either Elijah made a phone call to inform, or Julius' envoy arrived ahead of them. Your Highness, Sir Blaise has been waiting. Please come inside. The old butler bent over and extended his hand, beckoning them inside. Austin nodded. Then he made his way inside without a word. Since they were already here, there was no way they could just leave. Austin must give it a shot, even if it meant they were going inside the lion's den. They followed the old butler inside. After passing through various rooms, they arrived at the dining hall. At that moment, the dining hall was already set with a table of delicious food. The aroma of food mixed with the smell of wine stirred their appetite. Austin and the others had traveled for a day and a night without having time to eat. After seeing such a sumptuous meal, their stomachs couldn't help but growl. Your Highness, you must be starving after traveling for so long. Please enjoy the meal first, the old butler said respectfully. How about Sir Blaise? Austin asked. He'll be here soon. Please wait, the old butler replied, keeping his head lowered. If that's the case, don't mind if I do. Austin smiled and waved. Come over, you too. Come and eat. Yes, the few bodyguards answered. Then they picked up the cutlery and started to taste the food. As well-trained bodyguards, they could go without food or drinks for 3 days straight. The main reason they ate right away was to test for poison on behalf of Austin. One should always be cautious. If Lincoln had added poison to the food, they would be able to find out right away. Sir Austin, it's safe. After trying out all the dishes, the bodyguards nodded at Austin. Austin smiled faintly. Then he didn't hold back and started to gobble down the food. After not eating anything for a day and night, he was indeed hungry. It would be a waste not to eat so many delicious dishes. After an hour, they emptied the dishes. They even drank a few glasses of alcohol, truly having their fill. Your Highness, are you full? Do you want to add more dishes? At this moment, a well-dressed middle-aged man walked in with a smile. The middle-aged man wore glasses and had a refined temperament. He looked kind and appeared like an educated teacher. The person who arrived was the famous Lincoln Blaise. Uncle Lincoln, thank you for your warm welcome. I'm afraid I cannot eat anymore. Austin rubbed his round belly and even burped. There's not much good food or wine I can offer in such an impoverished village. I'm glad to hear that you had your fill. It makes me feel like my efforts were not in vain. Lincoln smiled. You're too kind. Austin smiled and continued, since you know we're coming. You should also know what happened in the monarchy recently. That's right. I've generally understood what happened. Lincoln nodded. Afterward, he continued frankly, to be honest, the Grand General of the Iron Stallion Cavalry's envoy had already visited me this morning before your arrival. Austin narrowed his eyes. Immediately, his expression turned serious. What answer did you give him? Lincoln's support was very important to them. There would have been dire consequences if Lincoln had sided with Julius. Lincoln didn't reply to Austin right away. Instead, he sat down and poured wine for himself and Austin. After gently clinking glasses, Lincoln downed the wine. Nice wine. Lincoln clicked his tongue and smiled in satisfaction. Austin wasn't in a hurry either. He also drank the wine and stared at Lincoln, waiting for his reply. Julius invited me to join his team and even promised to give me a lot of benefits. However, I rejected him. Upon hearing that, Austin couldn't help but show a hint of joy on his face. However, Lincoln's following words caused him to feel stunned. Your Highness, don't get so excited. Although I rejected Julius' invitation, I won't send my troops to help you either. I don't like war, so I'll choose to remain neutral, Lincoln said frankly. Neutral. Austin furrowed his brow. Then he quickly advised, you're a citizen of West Lucosia. How could you bear looking at the country being split up? Your Highness, my abilities are limited. Thus, I can't be of much help. Lincoln shook his head. He continued, I'm not ambitious either. I only want to live a peaceful and happy life. That's why I don't want to participate in this war. I'll be satisfied if I can keep my little piece of land. After pausing for a moment, he continued, to be honest, both you and Julius are legitimately of the Reese family bloodline. Thus, it doesn't make a difference which of you becomes the ruler of West Lucosia. In my eyes, this so-called rebellion is just a struggle for the throne. While Austin was rendered speechless for a moment, although he didn't want to admit it, Lincoln had a point. Your Highness, I've always been quite blunt. I apologize if I offended you in any way. Lincoln nodded calmly. It's reasonable that you want peace. However, if war breaks out, I'm afraid you won't be able to stay out of it, Austin said persuasively. Peace City is a small town at the border. It's quite impoverished and has nothing to offer. Even if there's a war, it won't reach here, Lincoln replied indifferently. He added, plus, I've already come to terms with Julius. As long as I don't get involved in the war, he can assure me that Peace City won't be impacted by it. I can promise you that if you help the monarchy suppress the rebellion and we succeed, I will reward you with a city. Austin made an offer, trying to entice him. However, Lincoln immediately shook his head without giving it some thought. Your Highness, I'm satisfied with just Peace City. I don't have time to manage another city either. Thus, I can only reject. You must have something you want, right? Just tell me. I'll definitely try my best to fulfill it. Austin was a bit anxious. Lincoln seemed indifferent to both power and money. He had no ambition or desire and was satisfied with what he had now. A person like him was way too difficult to persuade. I don't have anything I want. I only want to get away from any trouble. Please understand, Lincoln said calmly. Uncle Lincoln, I heard from my father that you're best friends with him. Now that my father has passed away and something happened in the monarchy, are you sure you want to just ignore it? Austin asked, deciding to use his father to persuade Lincoln. Lincoln was not heartless. Austin still had a chance if he showed enough sincerity. Your Highness, although I'm good friends with your father, he wouldn't force me to do something I don't want, Lincoln said indifferently. To be frank, your father is talented and strategic, commanding respect from all citizens in West Lucosia. However, you fall short in many aspects. In my eyes, Julius is more suitable to be the ruler of West Lucosia than you. You're right. I'm indeed not capable of becoming the ruler of West Lucosia. Austin nodded indifferently. He added, to be honest, I never thought of inheriting the throne. I only want to suppress the rebellion for the peace of West Lucosia. Since you don't want to inherit the throne, why do you want to fight for it? Lincoln remained indifferent. Although I'm not capable enough to become the ruler of Lucosia, someone is. That person is even more suitable than Julius, Austin said with determination. Oh, who is it? Lincoln raised an eyebrow. It's my eldest brother, Logan, Austin replied. Logan. Lincoln narrowed his eyes and nodded. You're right. He's more than suitable to become the ruler of Lucosia. However, the problem is that he has been missing for the past 10 years. There has been no news about whether he was alive or not. How can he inherit the throne? Logan is still alive. Plus, he has already returned to West Lucosia. The throne should definitely be his, Austin said seriously. Talk is cheap. Do you have evidence? Lincoln asked. If Logan really returned to West Lucosia, everyone would have known about it. In Lincoln's eyes, Austin was trying to find an excuse to get him on his side. I can provide you with evidence. However, let me ask you something. If Logan inherits the throne, will you fully support him? Austin shot back, while Lincoln furrowed his brow in hesitation. Seeing Austin so confident, Lincoln became somewhat uncertain. West Lucosia needs a good ruler. Nobody is more suitable to inherit the throne than my eldest brother. I'm sure you understand this, Austin said. Okay, if I can see His Highness with my own eyes, I promise to support you all. Otherwise, please find another person to support you. Lincoln said seriously. No problem. It's a deal then. Austin smiled after hearing that. Then he turned and looked at Dustin. Logan, it has come to the point where you have to reveal yourself. Dustin nodded. Without a word, he removed his prosthetic mask and revealed his face. You're. Lincoln instantly widened his eyes. He found it hard to believe. Uncle Lincoln, long time no see. Dustin smiled faintly. Your Highness. Lincoln was shocked, unable to react. He never thought that Dustin would disguise himself as a bodyguard and hide by Austin's side. Nobody would have figured it out if Dustin didn't expose his identity. Uncle Lincoln, what do you think? What a surprise, right? Austin smiled. He added, You're the second person besides me to know about his identity. We are now being open and honest with you, not hiding anything. Your Highness, you're still alive. Lincoln's voice was shaking. He got a bit emotional as tears welled up in his eyes. As Austin might as well be a stranger to Lincoln, he didn't plan on supporting him at all. However, Lincoln felt a sense of familiarity with Dustin. The reason was simple. Back then, Dustin's mother, Alba, had shown him kindness and even saved his life. Lincoln always wanted to repay her kindness. However, he never got the chance. He always felt regretful, especially after Alba passed away. When Dustin stood right in front of him, Lincoln felt like he was seeing the late Alba. Uncle Lincoln, thank you for worrying about me. I'm indeed still alive. Dustin nodded. Dustin didn't know about Lincoln's past. Thus, he felt a bit taken aback by how emotional Lincoln got. It's a good thing that you're still alive. Lincoln was both surprised and happy. 10 years have passed so quickly. You've gotten so tall. I almost didn't manage to recognize you. That's right. It's been 10 years. A lot of things are different now, Dustin replied with a sigh. 10 years ago, his mother passed away, and his father was also assassinated 10 years later. Over the course of 10 years, both of his parents were no longer around. It was a tragic fact. Uncle Lincoln, you said you would fully support the monarchy if you met Logan. Now that you've seen my eldest brother, you won't go back on your word, right? Austin tried asking. If His Highness is willing to inherit the throne, I'll support him to ascend the throne even if I have to sacrifice myself. Lincoln replied earnestly. Compared to his previous calm and indifferent demeanor, Lincoln exuded a spirit that had never been seen before. Okay, you're surely a trustworthy person. Austin smiled, letting out a huge sigh of relief. Alas, Dustin could only be the one who could get the job done. Austin had tried his best but still failed to convince Lincoln. Yet, the man had agreed instantly after seeing Dustin. Although it had been 10 years, the name of the Reese family's descendant still resonated deeply in many's hearts and commanded respect. Uncle Lincoln, nobody knows that I'm returning to West Lucosia. I hope you can help keep it a secret until I find out who killed my father. Dustin reminded him. Don't worry. I'll definitely keep my lips sealed. Lincoln nodded. Lincoln was a smart man. Naturally, he knew Dustin's intentions. The remnants of the Dragon Guard had assassinated Rufus, causing West Lucosia to be in chaos. Plus, Julius was now vying for the throne. If Dustin exposed his identity right now, he would become the target of criticism. On the contrary, it would be better for him to hide in the shadows and bide for time. Thank you, Uncle Lincoln. Dustin clasped his hands. Your Highness, I have a suggestion if you want to beat Julius, Lincoln said. An idea had suddenly popped into his head. Oh, please enlighten me. Dustin raised an eyebrow. Julius has considerable influence in the military. However, he still falls far short of the late prince. Although the Northern for Sovereigns are Julius men, more than 80% of the Black Dragon army are faithful to the late prince and the monarchy. If we use Your Highness' name to secretly contact the late prince's faithful comrades, I'm sure you'll be able to gather a strong team. This team alone will be enough to crush Julius, Lincoln explained seriously. After hearing that, Austin's eyes lit up. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? If I use Dustin's name to issue a command, I'm sure a lot of people will support us. Although Julius was influential, he was not unbeatable. As long as they partnered up with all the generals, they could completely sideline him without even going to war. It might have been possible 10 years ago. However, I'm not certain about it now. Dustin shook his head. 10 years ago, he was at the peak of his influence and commanded widespread support in West Lucosia. However, it was different now. A lot of things had changed after he disappeared for 10 years. Not many people would recognize and support him. Don't underestimate yourself. For people like us, you're the hope for the future of West Lucosia. As long as you inherit the throne, I'm sure many will be willing to support you. Lincoln was confident. Well, Dustin furrowed his brow, seemingly hesitating. Your Highness! Lincoln suddenly clasped his hands and claimed, I'm willing to help you with anything you face. If you trust me, let me handle this for you. I will secretly contact those loyal ministers and gather them. When the timing is right, we'll surely assist you. You only need to give us a call. You're indeed a righteous person. I respect you for that. Austin couldn't help but praise. If that's the case, thank you. Dustin clasped his hands back at him. It's my pleasure to be able to do something for you, Lincoln replied. Sir Blaze, something bad has happened. A guard ran inside and shouted, We got the news that soldiers have surrounded West Lucosian Castle. The monarchy is in a dire situation. What? It's being surrounded. Austin and Dustin's expressions went grim when they heard that. They were only out of the castle for 2 days. However, they didn't expect a change to happen so quickly. What happened? Tell us in detail. Austin asked anxiously. The guard took a look at Lincoln. After his superior nodded in approval, he continued. The Northern for Sovereigns led a team of elite soldiers to infiltrate the castle last night. All castle guards at the rank of colonel and above were held hostage. The entire military force is immobilized. The Northern for Sovereigns used the excuse of saving the country in times of danger to besiege the castle. They claim to be purging traitors to avenge the late prince. In reality, they're just trying to seize power. Austin was so angry that he slammed the table. How dare all of them? How could they surround the castle with their soldiers? They're going too far. Austin thought the most the Northern for Sovereigns could do was a siege to put pressure on them. He didn't expect that they would be so ruthless. The Northern for Sovereigns had pulled the rug out from under them. If the monarchy fell and Julius got the military insignia, it was over for them. It seems like Julius is well prepared. Dustin furrowed his brow and fell into deep thought. This unexpected move indeed caught them off guard. Dustin planned to ally with the Southern for Sovereigns and persuade some loyal ministers to go against Julius. However, he didn't expect Julius to go ahead of them and took complete control. There would be severe consequences once the monarchy fell. Dustin, what should we do now? Austin was a bit anxious. There's no time to think. We have to return quickly and resolve the monarchy's crisis, Dustin said in a low voice. But the soldiers we have now are not enough to go against Julius. Even if Uncle Lincoln and the others help us, it'll take time for them to mobilize their troops. We might not have enough time. Austin furrowed his brow. We don't have a choice. All we can do now is take a gamble. Then Dustin looked at Lincoln and said seriously, Uncle Lincoln, please contact my father's previous military department and aid the monarchy with the other 3 marquis. I will try to buy time until support comes. Your Highness, isn't this too risky? Lincoln frowned. We've already lost the chance to act first. Thus, we have to take this risk. Dustin lowered his back and said seriously, Uncle Lincoln, I'll have to count on you for everything that comes afterward. I'll definitely not disappoint you. Lincoln nodded. Thank you. After glancing at Austin, Dustin said, Let's go back to the castle and meet Julius. It was late at night, and a large number of armed soldiers formed a human wall outside the castle. Surrounding it, a dense crowd stood outside the castle, easily numbering tens of thousands. These were only the vanguard forces. There was still a team of armed military forces outside of the castle. They were the soldiers of the Northern for Sovereigns. Among them were also Julius guards. However, they had disguised themselves to blend in. Meanwhile, Eloise was wearing morning clothes and a hat inside the castle. She had an indifferent expression as she stood outside the gate. She was also holding a sharp sword. This caused her to look formidable and full of killing intent. As the princess consort, she stepped forward unhesitatingly at the most critical moment. She stood alone at the forefront. Jackson stood behind her, along with Draken Guardians dressed in combat gear. Although there were not many of them, they were the most powerful force in the monarchy. Behind the Draken Guardians were a bunch of guards and servants. The guards were armed with knives, while the servants had sticks. All of them were prepared for what was going to happen, ready to face death. Further back in the inner courtyard, a group of elderly, weak women and children wore mourning hats and wielded knives. Their eyes were fixed firmly on the gate. Once the Draken Guardians were wiped out and most of the servants and guards were killed, they would lunge forward unhesitatingly. All of them swore to live and die with the monarchy. Dad, Mom, I'm scared. A young child of about 10 years old wielded a knife in the crowd. He was shivering with fear, and his face was pale. He had been pampered for his entire life. Thus, he had never experienced something like this before. After knowing that thousands of soldiers surrounded the castle, he finally understood that the monarchy was going to fall. He would most likely lose his life tonight. You loser! A middle-aged man glared at him and shouted, All men of the Reese family have traversed battlefields and been buried in them. If you dare to back away, I'll kill you first. Dad, the child shivered, tears forming in his eyes. Stop crying. Men don't cry when they bleed. You just got a scar the size of a bull on your head. Wipe your tears. The middle-aged man shouted. The child didn't dare to talk, immediately wiping his tears. The woman beside him turned to look at him. She squeezed out a smile. Maverick, there's nothing to be afraid of. Dad and Mom will be by your side no matter what happens. Maverick, the more scared we are, the more we need to be strong. We can't let people look down on us. At this moment, a 14 or 15-year-old teenage girl spoke determinedly. Okay, the child gritted his teeth and nodded. Tiana. The woman took out a bottle of medicine and placed it in the teenager's hand. She urged, take care of your younger brother. In case we can't hold on, consume the medicine. It can spare you from some torment. I understand. Tiana nodded while clutching the medicine in her hand. She knew well that it was a bottle of poison. If the castle's soldiers couldn't withstand the invasion, she could only drink the poison. Otherwise, her fate might be even more terrifying than death. A solemn atmosphere enveloped the entire castle. Everyone knew that a huge disaster was about to befall the monarchy. However, nobody ran away despite feeling afraid and knowing they were about to die. At this moment, the soldiers outside the castle started to bang on the doors. The heavy castle door was banged on relentlessly, and the noise echoed with a resounding impact. Each strike resembled the blow of a giant hammer, resonating deeply in the hearts of everyone within. Open the door, Eloise shouted, ordering the servants to open the door. The unexpected move caused the soldiers attempting to break in to be completely baffled. They had no idea why Eloise would do such a thing. At this time, it made more sense for Eloise to close the door and defend till the end. Thus, they wondered why Eloise took the initiative to open the door. Perhaps there was a trap inside. Draven, Atticus, Mortimer, Ignatius, come out, Eloise called out while holding her sword. The soldiers outside were reluctant to approach because of her formidable presence. The 4 names she called out were the Northern Forsaverans, the main forces behind the rebellion. What's the matter? Do you guys not dare to admit what you've done? Are you guys just a bunch of cowards? Seeing that nobody answered, Eloise called out again. Her voice resounded in the entire castle. After a few seconds, the military forces outside the castle suddenly scattered and formed a wide path. Following that, 4 middle-aged men of different sizes walked side by side. They wore combat gear and were draped in capes. The people who came were the Northern Forsaverans. Draven is here to visit Your Highness. Atticus greets Your Highness. Your Highness, this is Mortimer. Greetings, Your Highness. I'm Ignatius. The 4 walked up to the door and greeted her. Do you still regard me as the princess consort? Eloise asked indifferently. What are you saying? You're always the princess consort, Draven said, smiling slightly. If you view me as the princess consort, why are you still starting a rebellion? Eloise shouted. You've misunderstood. We're not starting a rebellion. Instead, we're trying to help the monarchy, Draven answered with a smile. That's right. Beside him, Atticus also nodded. His Highness' death is too mysterious. We heard that someone was plotting against him. Thus, we sent some soldiers to try and catch the murderer. That's right. We're loyal to His Highness. Now that something happened to him, we can't sit by and watch, Mortimer added. I also think the same. Ignatius' answer was short and simple. We're currently undergoing a thorough investigation about his assassination. You don't need to worry about it. If you still have a shred of conscience, withdraw your troops immediately, Eloise bellowed. We're the Marquis, and we're obliged to come and help when the monarchy is facing trouble. Why are you reacting so strongly? Are you scared or guilty? Draven said meaningfully. How dare you suspect me? Eloise glared at them. Naturally, we don't doubt you. However, it's hard to say the same about the people around you. To avenge His Highness, we need to search the castle and question all suspicious individuals. Draven declared loudly. It's the rule that outsiders cannot enter the castle armed. Eloise shouted. One must take extraordinary measures in extraordinary times. Draven gestured. Go in and search. I'd like to see who dares. Eloise suddenly stepped forward. She lifted her sword and pointed it at Draven's throat. If any of you dare to step into the castle today, I won't go easy. After seeing such a scene, the soldiers who had just taken a step forward were frozen on the spot. After all, Eloise was the princess consort of West Lucosia. After being in power for a long time, she exuded a subtle air of authority. Your Highness, we're just trying to avenge His Highness. If you insist on stopping us, don't blame us for being disrespectful. Draven narrowed his eyes, a hostile glint flashing through them. The only way into the castle is over my dead body. With a huge sword in her hand, Eloise stood alone with great courage at the main entrance to defend the castle. She wasn't actually a strong fighter. At most, she could pass as a divine-level martial artist. However, her current presence was stronger than that of a grandmother. The common soldiers and even Draven were stunned. His brow was locked in a deep frown, and he didn't dare to move. The only thing he could do was to look at the 3 other sovereigns. Threats and the palace revolution aside, they needed a valid reason to attack Eloise. If they didn't, the people would protest and turn against them. They surrounded the castle in the name of staking out the killer. They'd be able to get off the hook if they acted a little brashly. They could use overwhelming sadness and being overly emotional as their excuse for their rude behavior. However, they'd never be able to explain themselves if the princess died in the revolt. If that happened, there would be a public outcry. In addition, the powerful figures of West Lucosia would be shaken. Oakvale would also send military backup to quell the riot. After all, Eloise was the princess consort of West Lucosia as well as the eldest princess of Dragon Marsh. Given her identity, they wouldn't dare to do anything foolish. Simply put, they could kill anyone in the castle. But not Eloise. As such, when Eloise was determined to fight them, they were a little taken aback. Generals, what should we do now? Draven looked at the three sovereigns and asked in a low voice. It's too late to turn back now, Atticus said coldly. That's right. We're so close to success. We can't give up now, Mortimer agreed. I understand that very well. What I'm asking about is what should we do about the princess? Draven asked quietly. There won't be any issue as long as we don't put the princess's life in danger. Ignatius said suddenly. Do you mean kidnap? Draven raised an eyebrow slightly. Do you have a better way? Ignatius retorted. Draven said nothing, but he turned to look at Atticus and Mortimer with a doubtful gaze. This is the only way for now. Atticus nodded. I agree. Mortimer nodded as well. All right, we'll kidnap her then. When consensus was reached, Draven shouted, Listen up. The princess is confused as she has been deceived by a traitor. Your duty is to protect the princess and send her to the hospital for treatment. Understood. Understood. The soldiers shouted their answer in unison. Listen to my orders now. Charge into the castle and save our princess. With a wave of his hand, a huge troop of soldiers put their weapons down as they rushed forward. Eloise was a respected princess, and they didn't want to bring any weapons. They'd be in trouble if they hurt her. Stop when the four sovereigns were about to enter the castle. A loud and angry voice thundered across the sky. At the same time, Austin descended from the sky in golden armor and blocked the main entrance. When he landed, his feet generated a huge energy wave, sending a few dozen soldiers flying. A vast space was cleared before him. How dare you? Standing at the entrance, Austin brandished his sword to block their entry. His aura was unusually strong. It was as if he was a soldier sent from above, and his presence struck fear in those around him. Austin. Eloise was delighted to see her son's safe return. However, her happiness was soon replaced with gloominess. She quickly realized that Austin came back with the same number of people and didn't bring extra military support. Did he fail? Eloise frowned slightly, and her heart was getting heavier by the minute. Their only hope was to get military support from the Southern for sovereigns. Only then could they fight the Northern for sovereigns. From the looks of it, things were not looking up. How dare you? Who gave you permission to enter and search the castle? Are you courting death? Austin shouted. His voice was as loud as thunder, and everyone present could hear him. It was almost deafening. The soldiers under the leadership of the four sovereigns were suddenly afraid to move. Oh, it's Prince Austin. You have returned. Draven let out a short laugh. He added, We, the four sovereigns, have discovered that the killer is in the castle. To avenge Prince Rufus, we need to search the castle for the killer. Your Grace, please let us in. Search my ass, Austin growled. Do you know where you are? The castle is not somewhere you can come and go as you please. Get lost. Your Grace, we are loyal and sincere. We're doing this for the country and the people. Why are you trying to stop us? Draven replied calmly. You can drop your act in front of me. Everyone knows you came with an evil intent. Austin said coldly. Your Grace, we don't know what you're talking about, Draven replied. Draven Vice, I'll give you one last chance. Leave now, and I will pretend that this never happened. You can still keep your titles as the West Lucosian sovereigns, and you'll still enjoy your wealth for the rest of your lives. Austin suddenly changed his tone when he finished speaking and continued. However, if you insist on having your way, I guarantee you'll live to regret this. Your Grace, we're just looking at the bigger picture. Please let us through. Draven was adamant. The other three sovereigns looked determined and had no intention to surrender as well. They had no real reason to surrender now that they were knee-deep in this revolt. They'd be considered national heroes as long as they helped the new ruler rise to the throne. They would be more powerful than they were now. In their opinion, Julius Reese, the Grand General, was the next best royal candidate to ascend to the throne after the death of Rufus Reese, the Prince of West Lucosia. As for Austin, they saw him as just another punk. Austin had no right to order them around. Let me warn you now. If you dare to step forward, I'll make your head roll, Austin shouted furiously. HM. Draven raised his brass slightly and gave a signal to the royal guards behind him. The guards nodded and moved forward slowly. You asked for it. Austin's face darkened as he wasted no time lifting the sword in his hand and waving it in the air. A sharp glint shot forth from the blade and sliced through the necks of a few of the royal guards with lightning speed. The royal guards stood frozen in place. In the next moment, their heads fell and rolled around like a ball. Draven narrowed his eyes, and instead of showing surprise, he shouted in delight, "Did all of you see that? The Crown Prince has gone crazy, and he is killing ruthlessly. As patriots, we should do our part to treat the Crown Prince as insanity so he wouldn't hurt the innocent. Come quick! Arrest the Crown Prince! Search for the killer in the castle!" Atticus yelled. Arrest the Crown Prince! Search for the killer in the castle! The four sovereigns started yelling one after another. In the next moment, a large troop of soldiers rushed toward Austin like a metal tidal wave. The battle had officially begun. Fuck! Austin was suddenly filled with anger when he saw the fully armed soldiers rushing in. He no longer had any mercy for them as he charged forward with his sword in hand. He had already achieved the grandmother status, and with his experience in the battlefields, he was ready for action. He stormed ahead with determination and courage. Protect the Crown Prince, charge! Eloise pointed her sword toward the sky. The Draken Guardians behind her quickly withdrew their weapons. Charge! Waving his long sword, Jackson led the Draken Guardians into the battlefield. The Draken Guardians might be a small team, but each member was a trained elite fighter. They were an invincible force under the guidance of a grandmother, Jackson. The team of around 100 was like a sharp and long knife. It didn't matter if their opponents' numbers were in the tens of thousands, as they'd be able to besiege the core of the army. The four sovereigns retreated under the protection of the royal guards to prevent any assassination attempts. I had no idea the West Lucosian monarch had such a powerful team. Draven was a little surprised as he narrowed his eyes and observed the Draken Guardians in action. It's a good thing that it's a small team of around 100. If not, we'd be in for a real match. Atticus sounded quite relieved. If my guess is correct, this is the legendary Draken Guardians. Rufus Reese personally selected the elites of the Black Dragon army to be part of the team. Every one of them is the best of the best, Mortimer said. No wonder they are so strong, Ignatius nodded. It doesn't matter how powerful they are. They are a very small team. It's not a real threat to us. Don't be fooled by their valor now. They'll eventually get tired. When that happens, their fate is in our hands, Draven added. Do you think something unexpected will happen? Atticus suddenly asked. What could go wrong? The castle is surrounded. It will eventually fall into our hands. Our army is also stationed outside the city. If there's any news, we'll hear it first. Don't you worry. Mortimer reassured him. That's right. All we have to do now is wait. It's only a matter of time before victory is ours. Eloise Linzer and her son won't change anything. Besides, we have the support of the Grand General. It won't matter if all of the Southern Four Sovereigns come to help. They won't make any difference. Draven was very confident. After the death of Rufus Reese, the monarchy was now left in a power vacuum. The weak would never be able to compete with Julius Reese, who was very powerful. It wouldn't matter even if Austin managed to convince the Southern Four Sovereigns. Their troops couldn't even enter the city, much less save the monarchy. Based on the current situation, victory was certainly theirs. As time passed slowly, the battle only intensified. Austin and Jackson led the Draken Guardians and fought relentlessly to defend the monarchy. They were very valiant in the beginning, The army of the Northern for Sovereigns was unable to stop them. However, as the battle dragged on, the Draken Guardians were beginning to show signs of lethargy. The difference in strength was slowly appearing. The Draken Guardians might be brave, but they were outnumbered. The army of the Northern for Sovereigns had strength in numbers. It didn't matter how many soldiers the Draken Guardians killed, as there would be more soldiers rushing toward them. After a few rounds of battle, the Draken Guardians were beginning to slow down and even suffered a few casualties. The Northern for Sovereigns felt encouraged to see that. Draven laughed, smiling gleefully. Do you see that? The monarchy's elite team can no longer defend themselves. Soon, they'll be finished by us. They were just too weak. Mortimer shook his head. What a waste of talent. It'd be great if they were under my command, Atticus sighed. Just when Ignatius got ready to speak, he pointed to a direction while narrowing his eyes and shouted in surprise, "Look, what is that?" The others looked in the direction he was pointing. They saw a dark object in the sky heading straight down, and it crashed in the middle of their troops. The explosion was deafening, and everything quaked as dust rose. There was a gigantic wave of energy spreading outward from the point of explosion like tsunami waves. The energy wave left a trail of destruction and painful moans wherever it passed. This attack killed and wounded at least a few hundred soldiers. The fuck? What the hell was that? Draven squinted his eyes. He couldn't see what attacked them due to the thick clouds of dust. Could it be a meteorite? Atticus sounded a little confused. A shooting star? How could there be such a coincidence? Mortimer refused to believe it. I can see it clearly now. It's a person. Ignatius had good vision and pointed at where the object fell. Then he shouted, "He's charging toward us." As soon as he said that, a dark shadow emerged from the clouds of dust and was running toward the four sovereigns. The dark shadow held a black sword and was moving very fast. He was unstoppable and was undeterred by the obstacles on the way. The fully armored soldiers were nothing to him as he defeated them easily. There were suddenly a lot of casualties. An assassin, quick, stop him! Ignatius came to his senses quickly and gathered the royal guards as he charged toward the shadow. He's only one, and we have thousands of soldiers to protect us. He might be able to fly, but he'll never get to us with the number of soldiers around us, Draven said haughtily with a cold look. Even though the most effective way to defeat an enemy was to kill the leader, it was actually the most difficult thing to achieve. It could only be achieved through covert means. It was a suicidal act for this lone assassin to attack the leader of the enemy so openly. They all had a team of royal guards to protect them. Even if there was a real threat, they could escape unscathed under the protection of the royal guards. They didn't have to fear for their lives. Draven, things are not looking up. That assassin is too powerful. The common soldiers couldn't take him on, Ignatius said with a frown. He had very good eyes. Hence, he was able to see that the assassin was killing everyone blocking his way. Why are you flustered? It's just an assassin. I doubt he could make any difference. Draven's attitude remained haughty. He was one of the 4 esteemed sovereigns. He mustn't show fear before an assassin. Draven, no, the assassin is getting too close. He's just a few feet away from us. We must retreat to safety. Ignatius shouted urgently. Well, Draven frowned slightly and looked displeased. He had thought that the assassin would never get this far. He had no idea that the assassin could actually penetrate this deep. The assassin had immense potential. The problem was that he had just claimed the assassin wouldn't get far. If he retreated now, wouldn't it be a blow to his ego? It'd be very embarrassing for him if this got out. Fuck it, whatever, retreat. Ignatius decided to give the order to back down when Draven couldn't make up his mind. He immediately got ready to leave with the royal guards. They were so close to success tonight. It'd be the joke of the nation if they were killed by an assassin. Ignatius was very alert. He quickly retreated with the royal guards when he saw the assassin advancing closer. Keeping himself alive was a priority now. He just needed to avoid the assassination attempt. When the assassin grew tired, he'd order the soldiers to kill him. This was the safest option. Draven, I think Ignatius is right. Safety first. I'll retreat for now. Atticus didn't dare to stay any longer as he slowly retreated with the royal guards when he saw Ignatius leaving. All of you are just scared. Draven frowned slightly with a disgruntled look. He then turned to look at Mortimer and expressively said, Mortimer, you've always been a brave fighter. You're certainly not retreating like those two, right? Of course not. Mortimer stretched a little bit and smirked. It's just an assassin. There's nothing to be afraid of. He became a sovereign after a bloody and hellish experience. There was nothing he had not seen. A worthless assassin was not enough to scare him. Good, we'll see how good this assassin is. Draven happily nodded as he signaled his royal guards. Get into formation. Capture that assassin. Yes, behind him. A few hundred royal guards withdrew their longswords immediately and charged forward to surround the assassin. Capture the assassin. Mortimer was eager to show off as well. He quickly withdrew his sword and led his team of royal guards to attack the assassin from another direction.